Welcome. You found Why We Are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott, and we're here at the Marin TV studios, San Rafael, California. But we're talking with Cyril Gordon. He's down in Gardena, California, down in that Los Angeles area. Hiya, Cyril.
Hey there.
All right, glad you could be with us. And so this is our first of two programs, and we're going to be just going through who you are and how it is that you got to be where you are. We don't know. So anyway, Cyril, let's talk about this. Where were you born? Give us some stuff about your folks, your parents, your family.
My mom's an Egyptian Jew who was kicked out of Egypt in the 50s, and they went to France, settled in near Paris, actually in Paris, where she met my father, a French Jew from Lithuania. And she had my brother and I, and they got divorced, and she moved to San Francisco with her brother and me and my brother, and that's where we were raised. We're the only Jews in an Italian Catholic neighborhood.
Is that right? So now, your mother was Egyptian, your father Lithuanian?
Yeah.
Okay. That's an incredible combination. I wonder how they got together.
Yeah, well, they met in Paris, and their marriage didn't last long, unfortunately. But we ended up in San Francisco after all that, and that's where I was raised in a Reformed Jewish synagogue called Temple Emmanuel.
Temple Emmanuel. Did you go to Hebrew school?
Yeah, I had my bar mitzvah at 13, like most Jewish boys at that time, and it was a big event in the biggest Reformed synagogue in San Francisco.
Okay. Well, I remember going to Hebrew school at the local, I think it was Reformed Temple, where I grew in Los Angeles. The population was half Jewish. And so all my friends were Jewish. And I would go to the synagogue with them in Hebrew school, and the Friday night dances. I remember that. But anyway, Cyril, so there you are. Sure, you're in San Francisco area. What high school did you go to?
I went to a private French school most of my life, but then transferred to Lowell High School.
Lowell? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, Lowell High School well.
You do?
Oh, yeah. Played their baseball team a few times. High school baseball coach,
No way. I played baseball for them.
Did you?
Yeah,
really?
From 81 to 84.
Really? Okay. I was coaching from 82 on. But
Which school?
What position did you play?
I was a center field.
Center field. The high school I was coaching for then was Tamalpais High School in Mill Valley.
Okay.
I'm wondering if I didn't see you or play against you at some time.
Did you know my coach Marty Demerit?
No, that name's not familiar to me. Yeah. But so you played little center field, huh?
Yeah.
Were you right-hander or left-hander?
Right-hander.
Okay. All right. So now you have a younger brother.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so what impressed you about attending the Reformed synagogue there, Cyril? What was that experience like?
Well, it was mostly about being Jewish culturally. We did the high holidays and we read from the prayer books. But I can't really say that we learned much about the Bible. I mean, the most that was taught was like, the Ten Commandments movie by Charlton Heston. We watched that every year. Even studying for my bar mitzvah, it was mostly about just memorizing the passage in Hebrew and not really studying the text.
Okay. Do you know later on, did you keep up Hebrew? Do you speak some Hebrew still?
Yeah, I actually moved to Israel in '95 and lived there for a couple years, and I took classes there, and so I can kind of buy things at the market and get around, but I'm not fluent yet.
Okay. Now the background that we're seeing, that's in the old city of Jerusalem, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a name to that road?
There probably is, but I don't know what it is.
Okay. All right, Cyril. So you're in San Francisco. Um, did you experience any prejudice against Jewish people in San Francisco at that era?
Yeah, the Catholic boys in our neighborhood would occasionally egg our house because we were the Jews. At one time they came into our garage and busted our new bikes. This was sort of random stuff that happened occasionally, but for the most part, we got along with them. In fact, my brother and I were good at sports, and so they had us playing in their Catholic sports leagues.
Yeah, okay. Well, I remember in Los Angeles, in Tonga, I got called Kike, Keeb, because everybody thought I was Jewish. Because I hung around with Alan Furstenberg and David Perlmutter and David Fram and Gary Tapper and Mike Roth and all those guys, you know. So I got a little prejudice, and I was nothing.
Yeah, you got a little taste of it, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, it popped up now and then, but it wasn't like systemic or anything.
So you missed the hippie era.
Yeah.
You were too young for the hippie era, which big deal then. So, well, tell me a little bit more about how you felt about high school there at Lowell.
Well, my senior year, I dropped out of sports, and my goal was, going to parties and chasing girls. And I joined this scooter gang, and we would ride our Vespa scooters around town and go to cafes and go to clubs at night. And so I got kind of into the whole party scene senior year, and that carried over into college at UC Santa Barbara, where I went. And I was heavy into the party scene there for 2 years until I finally got sick of it and started wondering if there was more to life than partying and that lifestyle.
Sounds a little bit like me, Cyril. Well, I was going to ask you, Cyril, how did you get the name Cyril?
Well, my mom liked the name. It's more common in Europe. In French, you say Cyril. And my brother's name's Patrick. Get that. But we have Jewish middle names. My middle name's Daniel, and my brother's middle name is Joseph. So my mom decided most Jews these days, they'll have a Gentile first name and a Jewish middle name.
Okay. All right. Very good. That's new to me. That's very interesting. Okay. Now, you graduate from high school there in the city. You said UC Santa Barbara?
Yeah.
My two youngest daughters graduated from UC Santa Barbara.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, great school. Love the town. Love the university. Great place.
Yeah.
So what were you studying there?
I was an art studio major. I did fine art, abstract paintings. It was abstract expressionism, like Franz Klein, de Kooning type of stuff. And painting for me was a way to express my search for the truth that started after my sophomore year. And I got into Eastern religion. Jews are attracted to Eastern religion when they start searching. In fact, it says in the Bible in the second chapter of Isaiah that the Lord warns us not to go the way of the East. And sure enough, if we're warned not to go that way, we go that way, right?
So you went that way.
Yeah, I dabbled in Buddhism and Taoism and Eastern religion for a couple years.
Okay.
Until I returned to my Jewish roots and got into Jewish mysticism and went to Israel and studied with the rabbis in Jerusalem. And that's when I discovered that the Bible was definitely inspired by God. And I started taking it seriously and became a modern Orthodox Jew in 1989.
Cyril, let me back up about the mysticism, Jewish mysticism. Could you please describe that a little bit? What was that about?
It's Kabbalah. It's an attempt to get to God through asceticism, through mantras, using the Torah, using gematria. It's certain disciplines, but it's centered around Kabbalah.
Okay. I know a little bit about that. Its approach is almost a shamanistic sort of mindset, getting in touch with spirits and energy. So
Well, it's trying to tap into God, but not doing it the right way.
So you went through that, and it didn't necessarily appeal to you.
Well, it appealed to me because it was dealing with the Word of God, and I was serious about God's Word at that time. I wanted more of God. I believed in God, but where was the God who spoke to my ancestors like I'm speaking to you? I wasn't seeing that. I didn't have spiritual peace, even though I was trying to be religious and follow the Mosaic law. I believed in God, but where was He?
So how old are you when you were in Jerusalem?
About 20.
About 20. So you were seriously searching. What did you think about Christianity at that point in your life?
Being raised around Catholics, that was my view of Christianity, that they worship idols and they go to mass, and they're not Jews.
Okay. Did you attend any churches when you were in Jerusalem at all?
Not really. I did go to Europe with a friend of mine, and we popped into some Catholic churches to look around, and it just confirmed what I thought, that they were all idol worshippers, because they had huge idols behind gates, because people were kissing them so much that their toes were falling off, and that's what it seemed like that faith was.
So the mysticism, the Kabbalah, and so on, it wasn't satisfying you.
Well, I got to back up a little bit, because I had an experience in college when I came back from Israel and went to my last year at the university. One of my girlfriend got pregnant and she had an abortion, and looking back, I could say that a darkness came over me after that. I needed answers, and when I was in Israel, I studied with a rabbi who I remember him telling me that if you want to get close to God, go to the desert.
The desert.
Yeah. I did a lot of exploring in the deserts when I went to Israel, in the Negev and the Sinai. So when I came back to California, I started going out to the deserts out here with my friends, Death Valley, Saline Valley, Joshua Tree. But I never went by myself. But after this experience with my girlfriend, with the abortion and our breakup, I went by myself to Joshua Tree to cry out to God. I had an experience out there that got me looking into Jesus, a vision that God gave me, but I didn't quite understand it. But somehow Jesus had popped up in this. So that was about 1990 when that happened, and that's why I started popping into churches and grabbing whatever I can about Jesus to find out more.
Now, Cyril, you said you had an experience with Jesus. Can you help us understand that a little bit more?
Well, I took a long walk when I got to Joshua Tree. At the campground, I walked about 5 to 10 miles, found a hidden valley, and threw away all my food. I cried out to God. There's some passages in the Bible that talk about groaning, and I could say it was almost that. I really wanted to know the truth. And all of a sudden, a couple clouds appeared in the sky, and one of them formed into a shape of a roadway to heaven, guarded by 2 angels with 6 wings. two coming out of the head, two from the back, and two at the Achilles heel. And they were guarding this roadway to heaven. And I felt like God was showing me that he was going to show me the way one day. He didn't say anything, but I felt that in my spirit. And in the other cloud, there was a vision of a man with a beard and a crown of thorns on his head. And I wondered, who was that? What does he have to do with the other vision? I mean, it looks like Jesus, but I wasn't crying out to Jesus. I was crying out to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Anyway, I wept all afternoon as I looked at these visions, because in a sense, God was answering me for the first time. But the sun started setting, and I had to get back to camp, and I didn't make it. I ended up in the middle of the desert, lost, and I tried to find my way back. And in the middle of the night, if these rangers hadn't come and picked me up, I wouldn't have made it. They were about as surprised to see me as I was to see them on this deserted dirt road I found. And they took me back to camp, and I got out of there.
Wow.
But after that experience is when I started looking into Jesus.
Wow, that's a wilder story than I expected to hear, Cyril.
Well, I finally understood what the vision was about.
Yeah.
About 4 years later, I came to understand that God was trying to show me what it says in the Bible, where Jesus said he's the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through him. And that's why I had the vision of the roadway to heaven and the vision of him.
Okay. Wow. Now, did you talk to anybody about that?
I did mention the vision to a Catholic friend of mine, but he kind of shrugged it off.
Yeah. So you're pretty much by yourself wrestling with all of this.
Yeah. And I didn't, I had roommates who said they were Christians, but they never talked to me about Jesus, and they did the same sin I was doing all the time. And I just grabbed anything I could about Jesus at the time, and eventually found a New Testament at a used bookstore in Berkeley, where I was living after I graduated from college. In 1993, I ran into a true Christian down in San Luis Obispo, where my brother was going to school, Cal Poly. And she was not Jewish, but I could see in her that she had a genuine faith in the God of Israel. And she had a shalom. She had a peace, a spiritual peace I didn't have. And she made me jealous. Oh. It says in Romans 11:11, salvation came to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. And I wanted what she had. We talked all night, and she shared the gospel with me. I didn't quite understand it at the time. But 2 weeks later, when I went back to San Francisco, she sent me a whole box of books about the real Jesus.
Books?
About the real Jesus.
Okay.
And through those books, I came to see that he indeed was the one prophesied in the Hebrew Bible.
Okay. So you're how old at this point, Cyril?
27.
You're 27. Are your parents or your brother aware of this spiritual search that you are on?
Yeah, I had been dabbling in all kinds of stuff since I was 20, and my mom knew that. So she thought that me dabbling in Jesus was also another phase. But, I graduated from college in 1990, or 89 actually, and then I moved to the Bay Area and opened an art studio, and I became a successful artist. I sold almost all my paintings. I was in galleries and museums. I had a big collector in France, and I was doing well, but spiritually I was in darkness. Even though I was a modern Orthodox Jew and going to synagogue and trying to pray and observe the holidays and all that. But when I started reading these books that were sent to me by this Christian, they outlined how Jesus fulfilled the many prophecies about the Messiah, that our rabbis, they don't point us to this at all. Like Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, and Leviticus 17:11. The life of a creature is in the blood, and I've given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your soul. It's the blood that makes atonement for your soul. I knew I was a sinner. I knew I was breaking God's law all the time. and I fasted on Yom Kippur like we're supposed to, but nothing ever changed. Here in Leviticus 17:11 was what was missing. I needed a blood atonement. And to know that Jesus was that blood atonement was good news for me, and I accepted that. And all my sins were lifted from me in one day.
Really?
I was totally transformed. The bondage I was in, I was freed from, and I was reconciled to my God for the first time ever.
Wow. And you're 27 years old.
Yeah.
This is in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Were you married?
Not married.
Not married? Okay. Okay, so let's take stock. Okay, so all of a sudden you have the experience that your sin has been lifted off of you, that burden. You experienced God's peace. Now, did you tell anybody about it? What happened to you?
Yeah, well, just to back up a little bit, the night before it happened, I had an intense dream where a being showed up in my dream, and I thought I was going to die in his presence because of the holiness and glory that emanated from this being that had eyes like flaming torches, from a welder's torch. You couldn't look at his eyes. And he held out this parchment that had all this writing on it. And in big letters on the bottom, it said, "It's time to come home." And he disappeared, and I woke up. And it was the next day that I came to see who Jesus really is. So it was a homecoming for me to come to him and accept him as the Messiah of Israel and the Savior.
Okay.
And when I experienced the peace and the forgiveness after accepting him, I was very excited. I come from a large Jewish family, and a lot of them read the Torah and they go to shul and they observe the holidays. And I thought, wow, when I tell them what I found here, they're going to have a party. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I tried to tell everybody, but they didn't want to know because it goes against their traditions. I remember telling my mom, and she looked at me right in the eyes and said, "Fine, believe what you want, but don't preach." I had a funny feeling after that I was going to be preaching the rest of my life.
Cyril, that's really something. So I had this dramatic experience. Some people have had this. I've heard testimonies like that. That there's a really dramatic thing. Mine was not like that at all, but it was very simple, ordinary in a way, very dramatic. And so what happened after that? What did you do?
Well, just to give a perspective, I was very bound up. The devil thought he had me. At that time in my life, I was addicted to pornography. I was roaming the streets of San Francisco for hookers. I was not in control of my life. I'd gotten arrested. I spent 4 nights in SF County. It was bad, and that's what really scared me, was that I couldn't stop doing this evil stuff, and I was not in control of my life. I was on a path of destruction, and I was so desperate to find help. I was going to psychics and channelers, even though I knew it was forbidden, and they led me astray. I even went to a gypsy, and she ripped me off for $1,000. And so I was in deep, deep bondage, and Jesus pulled me out of that. He completely set me free from pornography, from roaming the streets, all that stuff. I was able to break free from that. Now I'm married for over 21 years. I have 3 wonderful children. None of this would have happened if it wasn't for Jesus.
Right. Okay. Now, let me ask you, we just got about 2.5 minutes before we close out this first program, but did you connect with a church at all?
I called a bunch of people that I thought would understand what happened to me. A lot of them didn't have a clue, except for this one guy who was part of the Worldwide Church of God. And so he invited me to his church, and I went there for a little while in San Francisco. But then I moved to Hawaii and got plugged in with a Messianic congregation out there, and that's where I got discipled in Oahu and started meeting other Jewish believers. I thought I was the only one. I didn't know there were other Jews who accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And so I moved to the Big Island after that, and I met some more great Christians, got plugged into a church out there called Calvary Community Church. And so that's really where I got discipled, was in Hawaii for 2 years. Then I moved to Israel for 2 years and lived there and did evangelism. Then came back to California and started my own ministry for 3 years.
So
and
we're
then got
gonna.
plugged into bigger ministry.
That's where I want to pick up right there for the next program. Did you get baptized?
Yeah, I got baptized in Hawaii, in Oahu.
Okay. So Cyril, your brother. How did your brother react?
He didn't understand quite what was going on, but I kept reaching out to him, and he ended up coming to faith a year after me.
Oh, he did. He became a believer too.
Yeah, he's the only one in my family. The rest, they still don't want to know.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, this takes place in families. Division.
Yeah, and I'm not invited to things. I'm kind of shunned since this happened.
I understand. Yeah, that's pretty standard. It's a radical thing. When somebody starts to become a follower of Jesus, everything changes. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to start closing out. So, be looking for the next edition when we continue our conversation with Cyril Gordon. So long.